Hi everyone, thanks for watching my video. I got an X-T4 about 6 weeks ago, so I'm just getting into shooting F-Log and HLG. For all the shots in this video, I used the Canon FD50mm f1.8. The ISO was at 2000, 24 frames per second in 4K, and tripod focus pull shots, so let's get to it. Here is the HLG out of camera. I got a lot of color and a warm look, but I'm sure that's because I was shooting indoors under lamp lighting. It's a little noisy, but the noise looks good. It looks like a film grain. The base ISO for HLG is 1000, so at 2000 I'm double the base. For basic corrections, I used the color space transform node in DaVinci Resolve. The input gamma was set to Rec 2100 HLG scene. The whole video is rendered out in Rec 709. I used the picker to get my white balance where the arrow was pointing. I picked the same spot for white balance in all of the test shots in this video. At 200% we get a better look at the noise, but it's good noise. It looks like the grain overlays that I use. Moving on to the F-Log footage, here you can see that it's not as warm and lacks saturation as we'd expect with log footage. And I think this is what we want to see, especially if we plan on doing some heavy grading in post. I used the color space transform node again, this time with the Fujifilm F-Log as input gamma, and I also did the same white balance again. Important to note here is that the color space transform node was at the end of my node tree and not at the beginning. And I swapped its placement, the color space before the white balance, and there was a significant difference between those shots. Maybe one of you know whether it should come first or last. I don't know. I've seen videos where it's used differently, so I just don't know. There's much less noise in the F-Log footage, almost unnoticeable, but the rumor is that ISO 2000 is a higher base ISO for F-Log, and that may explain why. This 8-bit film simulation also produced nice results. Here the shot is warm as we'd expect with the Eterna film simulation. It has more saturation than F-Log, but less than the HLG footage, and it seems to split the baby between HLG and F-Log in the shadows, having what appears to be more dynamic range than the HLG footage, but less dynamic range than the F-Log in the shadows. But in the highlights at ISO 2000, the Eterna is much closer to being blown out than both the HLG and the F-Log. The film simulation was the easiest of the three to color correct and grade. It was kind of already in the neighborhood of where I wanted the finished grade to be, and so that may be a factor. Like the F-Log, there was a lot less noise in the Eterna footage than the HLG, and the difference between the Eterna and the F-Log noise-wise was insignificant. Here are all three out-of-camera samples side by side. The differences are obvious, but don't forget that the placement of the color space transform node seemed to make a big difference in the HLG and the F-Log footage. And the samples after basic correction, the F-Log looks noticeably different than the other two. Even with the color space transform node swapped, it just still looked different than the other two. So I also wanted to push these shots a little bit in post. Pretend this is a reveal scene in a short film. The killer's name or the place where the last bomb is hidden is going to be revealed once the focus pulls to the handwriting. So I want to direct the viewer's attention to that place in the shot. Here I wanted to darken and even crush a little bit the shadows and give them a blue tint. And using gradients, I added some darkness to the lower left corner and reduced exposure and warmed the top right corner where the source of my light was coming from. And with a circle mask, I brightened very slightly the place where the writing is located. This is the HLG footage with basic correction and then with the final grade. The HLG was not as hard to grade as the F-Log, but nowhere near as easy to grade as the Eterna footage. I like the noise in this shot, and I would have not had to have added grain here. With the F-Log footage, I was able to get in the ballpark of where I wanted to be. The highlights are warmer than those in the HLG, and I think it's because I had to add saturation to the F-Log footage rather than take it out like I did in HLG. So it made getting my tone much easier, but getting the shadows where I wanted them was more difficult. And that could be just me not knowing what I'm doing. I'm learning this stuff as I go. And with the Eterna, I didn't have to fool with saturation at all, so I could just play with my luminance and with my tones and the shadows and highlights. This was the easiest of the three to grade for me, but this is 8-bit footage, so if it had not come out of camera close to where I wanted it to be already, I wonder if I could have pushed it as much as I did the HLG and the F-Log footage, and I think probably I would not have been able to. Another quick look at the noise after the grading, and we have the same results. The HLG is noisy, but it don't look bad. I add this kind of stuff to my videos to get this kind of look all the time. This noise is not blotchy and it's not chromatic. I can live with this. And the F-Log and the Eterna, noise-wise, they look fine. And what little noise does exist in these shots is negligible. So final thoughts. I've had the X-T4 for about 6 weeks. It's my first camera that shoots log and HLG in 10-bit. And I'm just getting into the video side of this camera. I've been mostly using it for photography and some B-roll stuff for my photography videos. The next time I shoot HLG, I'm going in camera and reduce the saturation. I think this would make it easier to grade. There's the option of selecting high ISO noise reduction when shooting HLG also. And if I want a nice grainy looking noise in my shots, I could close my aperture down and raise my ISO and get it that way. The F-Log was fine, but where to place that color transform node is definitely something to ponder. And having the option of moving that color transform node is also a possible way of grading this footage. Saturation is turned off when you're shooting in F-Log, so cranking it up in camera is not an option. And the film simulations. If there is a film simulation that closely matches the final look I'm going for, meaning I will not have to do a lot of pushing in post, then it looks like a great option as well. Here, the Eterna worked great. Anyway, I'm excited about this camera and the options for video in camera and in post. If you have any comments, questions, or suggestions, then please let me know. Thanks for watching. See you next time.